Bonsoir.
Good evening and welcome to this panel discussion. Can you hear the interpretation? I think you need to turn the device on first.
Ok, super. Déjà, merci beaucoup pour.
So first of all, thank you. Thank you so much for this film.
Je vais poser quelques questions du coup à Perla.
I'm going to ask Perla a few questions. So the first one is maybe it is to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and to introduce the context within which you've made this documentary.
This is really weird.
I know, parce qu'en fait, on est tous les deux italiens.
We're both Italian, and I don't speak English very well, so
Personne veut entendre ça.
nobody wants to hear me speak English.
So thank you for coming and thank you for inviting me. So I started filming in 2021 when the dock workers they've been doing strikes and they've been like struggling with this weapon trafficking and weapon coming into the port of Genoa for some years. So actually, I mean, right now it's like it's in our common language, you know, to talk about war and to talk about like weapons and to talk about this weapon coming and going out of our ports. But in 2021, it wasn't like a real issue, or I mean, it wasn't like that public. So what they did, they make it that, you know. So they started to make these weapons entering the port and a union issue. So they started organizing and they started doing strikes within their union. Then their union failed them, and so they changed union and they like brought into the port a more aggressive one, a more like leftist one, we can say. And right now, I mean, we are kind of used to talk about weapons and war language and war economy. I mean, and there are all these plans, and what's been going on actually is like that we've been normalized to this kind of things and this kind of language. But I mean that in Genoa, in Italy, but also in other parts of Europe, I think, they started something, I think. So I wanted to follow them and see how they were organizing, how their words and their, you know, their languages changed, and how they started to, you know, form something against this weapon trafficking. So that's why.
Merci beaucoup. C'est d'ailleurs un peu le sujet
Thank
de la
you.
discussion d'après.
Well, that's actually the subject of the debate that we will have just after, how to organize, how to create solidarity.
Je voudrais te demander,
I wanted to ask you,
ces dockers
these dock workers,
finissent par adhérer à plusieurs causes.
they end up supporting several causes. I don't know if we can talk about intersectionality, but it's clear that they show solidarity towards violence against women. How did that happen, according to you?
Okay, so of course it wasn't their first thought, you know. They are workers, they are, a lot of them are activists, anti-fascist activists, but when something like the Martina story happened to one of their comrades or one of their, you know, the workers that they work every day, it became their matter, you know. So intersectionality, I think it works well because it's something that maybe you don't expect, but it becomes something that you fight for at some point. And for me, it was a central issue because I think that if you want to talk about anti-militarization, anti-war movement, it's important to connect it to the, you know, to also the colonization of bodies, because lands and bodies are not to be conquered. And so for me, it was an important issue to put on in the film also. And I struggled a lot during the editing to like make sense of it. But in the end, I hope it does in some ways.
Yes.
And so that's it.
Okay. Une dernière question
One last
sur
question
l'actualité.
on current affairs.
L'Italie fasciste vient d'entrer en guerre.
Fascist Italy has just gone into war. I'm going to say things like it is. Our fascist president has allowed the US to use military bases on our territory, especially in the south of Italy and Sicily.
Comment ce film
I
pour toi résonne avec l'actualité?
I would like to know how you think this film echoes current affairs. Is it the beginning of something, and what is going to happen next? How are you experimenting this apotheosis of fascism in Italy today?
I mean, I hope it can continue this struggle, but I know that it will. Because, I mean, one of them, Jose, also joined the flotilla movement last winter. So, I mean, that the focus has not shifted. I mean, I think it's more dangerous and more difficult to organize and to go into the streets and fight for these issues, because what you said is true. Actually, they are passing a lot of laws that enables like repression in Italy, but everywhere, I think. And so we hope for it to be, you know, not easy, because it's never been easy, but to be possible.
Ok, vu qu'on a encore 4 minutes.
Great. Well, we'll still have 4 minutes left. So I would like to thank you for this film, because since 2022, in France, I feel very lonely regarding to what was happening in Italy. So I was very happy to meet you and meet Italian activists, because with such films, you can create connections within a country where the situation is, there are reasons to despair. And I hope that as activists, we will be able to zoom away from France or Switzerland and look at what is happening elsewhere. And how, of course, I know Sicily, but maybe elsewhere it's happening as well. How local populations can organize to contribute to disarmament and support flotillas. So that's something I invite all of you to do, even if you're already activists. It's important to look outside the box. And once again, thank you so much for your wonderful film.
Et du coup, oui, tu peux. Je vais inviter donc. Du coup, j'avais invité sur scène Sarah Schulman.
Now I'm going to invite on the stage Sarah Schulman and Adèle Haenel for the panel discussion.
Alors, donc, je me présente vite fait. Donc, moi,
I would like to introduce myself very quickly. My name is Spina. I'm a journalist and author. I worked for about 10 years in the queer media, for the queer media Manifesto 21. I'm here this evening together with Sarah and Adèle. Sarah, who's a major figure in cultural and political struggles of today. She's an author, an essay writer, an activist from the US, whose works have influenced us very greatly. especially around issues of social justice, LGBTQIA plus rights, transnational struggles in solidarity with the Palestinian people. At her side, Adèle Haenel, who's one of the most remarkable French actresses and activists of her generation. She's had very striking roles that have been a real source of inspiration for us. And at this stage, she's continuing her action through Gisèle Vienne on stage and through more personal work of yours. I think you're about to publish your own book, if I'm not mistaken. Adèle, of course, is very interested in calling out systemic violences against women and children. Very recently, she engaged with the Global Summit Flotilla, a humanitarian mission whose aim it was to break the blockade of the Gaza Strip and deliver aid to the Gazan people. That's it for the context, I think. Do you have maybe a sheet of paper that I could use just to take notes, if I may? This is a bill, but you can write on the back side of it if you'd like. Recycled paper. But that's all right. So maybe let's start with something simple. Could you define what solidarity means for you?
In English, so I will. I think that we have this idea of solidarity that makes it impossible to do. My goal is to make solidarity more doable by stripping away ideas of heroism and perfection, which first of all don't exist anyway. But these are the things that stop us. If we can understand solidarity as a process of making mistakes, being self-critical, listening, and trying again, then it becomes something that we can all do.
Adèle?
Adèle? It's a tall order. It's hard to define for me. I'd have a hard time coming up with a comprehensive definition. To me, it's stepping up and taking responsibility. Solidarity isn't a one-way street. It's an exchange. It goes both ways. It's exchanging resistance practices and building a network of activists to make knowledge travel. With support practices, be it through funding or hosting. It doesn't matter.
It's a concept that's always changing, because when you think about the film that we just saw, right, this is like horizontal solidarity. You have the workers and there's the boss, and if the workers unite in solidarity, they can have power. But now, the boss is a global conglomerate, right? So sometimes this traditional concept of solidarity is not enough. And we need to reach out and make relationships with other kinds of people. So particularly in terms of Palestine, I think there's two other groups. There's bystanders, people who are not implicated, but they know that there is an injustice. And then you have conflicted perpetrators like myself, Jews and Americans who these crimes are being done in our name. And so we must stand up and say no. But these relationships, the people who are being oppressed, the bystanders, and the conflicted perpetrators, these are not equal relationships. These are not people in equal positions. And so the relationship has to be, by definition, fraught. And that's why we have to understand there are always going to be errors. I mean, I make mistakes every single day. It's the nature of the relationship at the base of the action.
C'était justement la suite.
And that was exactly what I was going to ask you, Sarah. In your last book, you described solidarity as a shift in the power relations between the stakeholders, support given by people in positions of power, maybe perpetrators, to use your own words, towards victims. How can these power relations change and turn into solidarity?
How is that going to transform?
Ouais, ouais.
Aha, then
How
does it work?
Transform into solidarity?
Well, I mean, this brings up a very important question, which is about being effective. You know, because we've all been to these demonstrations, right, where you march around in the rain, and then you go to hear the speakers and it's still raining, and they're telling you something you already know, and you're saying, like, what is this going to do? Because one of the things in the left is that we do things and it doesn't work, and then we do it again exactly the same way. And we have to be much more conscious about being effective. So when you look historically at movements, now I'm a historian of the AIDS movement, and of course Adèle was in BPM, right, incredible, about ACTA Paris. So we both have spent a lot of time thinking about AIDS history. But these movements that are successful are because they link a demand that is winnable to the action. If you just are doing the action and you don't have a demand that's winnable, you will not go anywhere. But if you have a demand that's winnable and you link it to your action, you have a campaign. And then you have a purpose behind your action. It doesn't mean you're going to win tomorrow, right? But you're building an infrastructure for the future. So I think we really need to think about being effective where we're at. And since we're all at different places, right? Because people can only be where they're at, unfortunately. I wish everyone was exactly where I am at. And I've been in therapy for like 40 years trying to deal with that. But people can only be where they're at. So leadership is helping people be effective where they're at. And it's a different concept. It's not the old time, it's not the old school Communist Party concept where we all have to have the same analysis and we all have to have the same strategy. We can all have different analyses and we can all have different strategies, but we have to be effective.
Adèle, est-ce que tu veux rebondir?
Adèle, do you have anything to add to what Sarah's just said? I don't really know because to me, solidarity is not necessarily the word I would use. I would use resistance rather than solidarity. So I'm sorry, I might not be answering your question directly, but there are many things in what Sarah's just said. The fact that you need to have a very specific agenda with specific levers, demonstrations, that seems to me absolutely necessary. And then I guess there's a capillary resistance that might not require an agenda, but that might be done through love, friendship, proximity, the fact that you care for people, and that creates social fabric. We're talking about solidarity, but I think society or the neoliberal capitalistic world we live in destroys relationships. And so to me, what's important, fascism destroys relationships, empathy, sympathy that we can feel for others. So I think we need to work on rebuilding the social fabric. But I'm not sure we're speaking about the same thing. That gives me a segue into my 11th question, and that leads me to the end of the session. That was a quick one. Yes, that was a quick one. No, but my question was exactly that. There's something that seems to me important in the ultra-liberal Europe of Meloni. These are governments who criminalize solidarity. We've seen the neoliberal policies that destroy relationships, as you said. So how can we build communities? You spoke about love, you spoke about friendship. Yes, I'm casting a white net. No, but that's not a problem. I would like to know how we can build, maintain, preserve communities. How can we manage to repair these relationships according to you?
C'est quand même une question, elle est, enfin, c'est vaste quoi, mais je sais pas. En fait, après moi, j'ai pas envie de dire c'est mon
It's hard
expérience
to
à moi,
answer
mais
your
je sais pas si on
question.
voit, par exemple,
I can only talk about my own
enfin,
experience, but
solidaires,
if
en
you
Amérique du Sud,
look
et
at
puis aussi
soup kitchens
enfin,
in Latin America,
c'est trop compliqué pour moi. trop vaste.
I think it's too complicated for me to answer your question. I'm sorry. Maybe tangible actions that we could start in our communities, things that would bring us together on a daily basis. Sarah, in your book, you mentioned this person who became an incel because he felt excluded from the community. He felt outcast.
Okay.
You want
I think
very
one
tangible
thing is,
things?
this is a good. Well, let me say, we're living in fascist cataclysm, and I come from fascist America, but socialist New York. Thank God we have this great new mayor, right? But I mean, America is completely crazy right now. I mean, it is totally insane. It's 2 + 2 = 5. We're being lied to all the time. As I was telling my friends earlier, the government is coming into museums and removing exhibits because they think there's too much discussion of slavery. It's about white men who think they're being discriminated against. I mean, it's crazy. Okay, it's crazy land. But politically, when you analyze it, it means every single milieu is being attacked. Every group of people is under attack. So when you're trying to build a movement, you have to understand that people are going to be different and have a different experience of what is happening. And so it's a time when you need radical democracy, which to me means the acceptance of difference with a bottom line. And everyone has their different bottom line. But only this Big Ten politic is the only thing that's going to be able to help us build relationships with each other. Even if you take, for example, like the Catholic Church, one of my personal enemies, right? But now we have this new pope, okay, and he hates gay people and he hates women and all of this, but he's really good on immigration. And so in Chicago, priests are standing up and fighting against ICE and getting arrested. So I'm like, okay, I can stand with them on this. Then when we disagree, I have to walk away. But this idea of purity politics, where you can only be with people who agree with you on everything, it's over. Forget about that. This is not that kind of moment. So the potential community is everybody. And if you can be flexible. It's almost like asking us to grow up and accept difference so that we can be strong together.
J'ai toujours l'impression d'être un peu en vide comme ça, mais oui.
I always feel like I'm a little off topic.
Je sais pas, après moi je peux parler de mon expérience
I
personnelle.
can talk about my own personal experience. Might be better than to talk only about generalities. I'm an actress and I'm also a director. And in the arts, it's important to produce a vision of what is currently happening, conflicts. And it's also important to understand the mechanisms that divide the population, what makes us other people. It's really important to understand these mechanisms. Thank you. Yes, it's also a central question to Sarah's body of work, condoning injustice, not acting in the face of injustice. In your works, Sarah, you very often talk about the fact that the first gesture of solidarity is to be responsible and to act when you see people in danger. Maybe that's something that you can develop. especially when it comes to relationships that help fight against something.
There's so many scapegoats to choose from, right, in this moment. I mean, my government has deported tens and tens of thousands of people. We don't even know how many or where. All the numbers that are coming from the government are false, right? They've fired thousands and thousands and thousands of people. There's new laws against trans people everywhere. There's laws that you can't, any law that existed to fight racism is now illegal. So, I mean, it's just, it's a total breakdown. But so I'm trying to think of kind of concrete things to share with you. One thing is, I think this is a great time to join pre-existing organizations. And you don't have to agree with everything that they say and do, you know, because it's just about building the infrastructure of human relationships. And if you hate everybody and you can't join any organization, then get together with 2 people and read the newspaper once a week, you know. Because we're lonely. We've all been online stupidly, and we had COVID, and people need to be together. And we need to have the intimacy of time together to find out how each other is feeling and to come up with brilliant ideas together. So anything that helps build that kind of infrastructure will build community, because that's the special gift you get about when you become an activist, right? You get all these great relationships that last forever. I mean, people who were in ACT UP together, okay, now we're in our 70s and 80s, but we're still yelling at each other, actually. But you're bonded forever, even if you hate them. When you see them, you love them because you made the world better together. And this is the personal enrichment of working with other people.
Adèle, toi aussi, dans le milieu culturel.
Adèle, in the world of the arts and culture and cinema, you've spoken up. You've spoken up against a system where there was a lot of people were complicit to the current situation. Maybe you can share with us your personal experience, if you want to. What does it take to break the silence?
En fait, je peux pas parler des choses de manière extérieure parce que moi.
Well, it's difficult for me to have an external point of view because it's my life and I had no choice. I got involved in the Me Too movement in France, and it became unbearable to have to live with this silence. You know, you keep saying breaking the silence. You know, there are people before me who made it possible for me to speak up, and I just followed suit. And regarding solidarity, the first thing I did was to stop collaborating against myself with the system. A system that was stifling me. Patriarchal system based on sexual and sexist violence, especially against children. And when I stopped living in denial, you know, the family structure is based on denial. The people closest to you, the relationship you have with them is based on denial. And once that collapses, that denial that was unbearable for me, suddenly you can go around your denial and you realize that you've been living in denial because it's a lot more comfortable than to not look at things. And you're basically dehumanizing yourself. And when you understand that, you stop dehumanizing other people. And that's how solidarity came into my life. It's not that I wanted to help people, it's that I couldn't see any other way to live. I threw myself forward because I was trapped in silence and I felt like I was going to die. I don't want to be too dramatic, but I just want to say that what drives me is not intellectual. It's just I want to live. So I needed to break free from that silence, and along the way I met comrades who opened my eyes on different types of silence. That's why solidarity is an experience that happened to me through relationship. That's why I was talking about love. It might seem a little bit woo-woo, but if I manage to educate myself on Palestine, apartheid, and decolonization, global strikes, because I met people who educated me, and then I joined their struggles. So solidarity is a way of life to me, and solidarity and resistance.
You are so rare. I mean, there's so few people who speak out against the monster of the culture machine. I mean, especially people at your level of talent. I mean, I respect you so much for what you're doing. And it's so necessary, because we're always being told, oh, this book is so great. And then you go and read it and it's terrible. This movie is so brilliant, and you go to see it and it has terrible values, right? And it's like everyone's pretending that bad culture is good, and now we know it undermines democracy. And the fact that you speak out against that is so inspiring, and I really appreciate it.
Merci, merci beaucoup. Je voulais juste dire, mais du coup là je pars en live, c'est plus du tout le sujet, mais c'est juste, je me dis par rapport à moi aussi la question de la résistance.
I might digress here, but I want to talk about resistance, because resistance I think it's part of solidarity. Well, it's an open discussion. Feel free to take it wherever you want to. Well, that's my personal experience. You may or may not be able to transpose it to your own life, but what I found interesting was understanding my own level of agency. The first time I spoke up, I felt like I was going to explode. For the first time, you're alive and you have to talk about sexual assault. There's a before and after. And then I started getting used to it. And now I feel a lot more aligned. So I first started talking about sexual violences from the lens of my own experience. And there was this ceremony where I just stood up and left. But, living ethically, that's something that you learn to enjoy. And these people who are so powerful and who live in the shadow, you realize that they exist, they have a body. If they're grabbing me, I can grab back. Well, thank you so much. Well, what I'm trying to say here is that these things are real. These things are real. It's not conceptual. Sarah is telling you, meet people. For example, you're interested in water. But for me, it's the same. When you become an activist, you discover your power. And courage is contagious. We've seen it in demonstrations, we've seen it, in Iran and anywhere. Courage is so contagious and makes us so powerful as a collective body. And that's why we're here. We're here tonight to talk about. It's not about talking about what we've done, it's about talking about what we are going to do all together now.
Donc, en tout cas, je précise que quand on parle d'amour,
would like to say that talking about love, talking about care, it's the case for me, and it's probably the case for many people here. These are not abstract notions. These are notions that I've been working on for a long time now, and very often I was criticized for my interest in such abstract notions, but for me they're extremely important, and I would like to thank you for what you said about agency. The agency you can have and the power you can find in yourself to speak up. Once again, it all depends on the situation, on individual situations. I always feel people tell me, well, you've paid a high price for your commitment. Yes, it's true. In a sense, I said stop to my career, to all the money that I earned that way. But what I earned, on the other hand, is just huge. At the end of my life, I'll be able to look back and say I've lived my life fully. I didn't remain silent because it was good for my career, and I'll be very proud to have lived this life. It makes me very powerful.
Sarah, je voulais
Sarah, I wanted to talk about an issue that we have in common, which is the fight for the Palestinian people. According to you, why is this movement so queer at this stage?
So queer. Is that the question? I have many thoughts about that.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I know.
Well, one thing is that, I have this new book. It's coming out in France in September about solidarity. And I have a chapter on Jean Genet in Palestine. And, Jean Genet was like the first queer activist, openly queer activist for Palestine. I mean, everyone knew that he was gay. And his friendship was very much appreciated. And what's interesting, and I noticed when I first came into that movement 16 years ago, is that they welcomed everybody. I mean, it was incredible. I had been told, you're always being put in your place, right, in your own society. And then they didn't care. And so many queer people and trans people also were welcomed into that movement. So that's one thing. Another thing is that some of the key organizations in the United States that are Palestine solidarity organizations were started by gay people, like Jewish Voice for Peace, which I'm in now. It's a 30-year-old organization that was started by mostly lesbians and a couple of straight women 30 years ago. We now have 35,000 members. This is an anti-Zionist Jewish organization that supports the boycott of Israel. It's quite amazing. So from the beginning, you have gay people everywhere, gay people being welcomed into the Palestine solidarity movement. I mean, when I was the faculty advisor to Students for Justice in Palestine, and the group that I worked with was religious Muslim women, they asked me to be their advisor. They didn't care that I was Jewish and lesbian. They didn't care. It was about what are your politics, what is your freedom vision. So that's why. Because if you actually welcome people into your movement, they will come and they will stay. I mean, and that's the proof.
Moi, je prendrais la chose d'un autre point de vue, en fait.
I think I have a slightly different take on this. I wouldn't necessarily talk about queer people, but about heterosexual people, straight people. Heterosexuality is a political system that has its own way of being hegemonic. It maintains its own system as if it were a natural system. It's perpetuating its own system, pretending it's natural, whereas in actual fact it's artificial. And therefore, being politically straight prevents thinking justice.
Remember I said you make mistakes every day? Well, you just witnessed my mistakes, so let me correct myself. The other huge element is the queer Arab movement, the rise of the queer Palestinian movement. in 2011, I organized a U.S. tour for 3 leaders of the queer Palestinian movement who came to America and went and made a tour of 7 cities. And we're seeing queer Arab movements everywhere. And in Lebanon, there are queer, before this current Israeli crushing of Lebanon that we're watching now. I'm talking before. But because the queer Arab world has evolved in its own way in the diaspora and at home, that has also made it so much more possible for gay people to be in the solidarity side of the movement.
Tu veux rebondir?
Did you have anything to add?
Mais c'est aussi parce que,
yes, thanks for the comment. Lesbian communities, I'm talking about a specific territory. I live in Paris. I'm active mostly in Paris. These are educational communities. There are conflicts. We raise issues. We educate ourselves. So there's a collective dynamic of a community that leads us to become more political, to fight against the colonial system. As if there was a continuum of strategies that are passed on from one struggle to the next. Yes, and it's a context in which you discuss, you think, the environment in which you are. I participated in the demonstrations on March 7th and March 8th. There were different movements, including femo-nationalistic movements, and the demonstration was cut into 2. There was the feminist movement, the majority of which refused the presence of these femo-nationalistic movements and Zionist movements.
T'inquiète, je continue ou tu...
Should I continue? Let me know whenever it comes back to you. We spoke about communities, the queer community, the trans-feminist community. There's one thing I think we wondered about in our experience as activists is how you deal with conflict within a single movement. Several books were published on this issue that talk about activist burnout, how to solve conflicts in activist movements. And I wanted to know how you think conflicts in activist movements can come and enrich us, how we can deal with it, how we can address it, how it can help us extend our scope.
I think we've surpassed that moment. I think, yes, because, I did write a book about conflict, and I personally love conflict. I'm very aggressive myself. But it's not just about the left now. It's every community is being attacked. And we have to learn to live with difference. This is our biggest challenge. We're so stuck in white supremacy and in what you're calling the colonial perspective that, we've mimicked this in all these parts of our lives, that people who see things differently, we condemn. And that's not going to work. It's too big now. We have the coming together of the oligarchs and the fascists. They have joined together, and they are in power. So it really doesn't matter what your analysis is at this point, I think. It's try to build relationships and look at concrete things you can do. Like, for example, when I was on a jury here in this festival, I was invited, and the first thing I wanted to find out was, does this festival show films that take Israeli state money? No, it does not. And I'm here now for that reason. But if the answer was yes, I wouldn't be here. So it's just like every step you take, every relationship that you build, in that moment, You have to do what you think you can do that's the most effective. Because I just want to say, my big thing that I want to say is the only thing you can control is your integrity. That's it. So don't give it away.
J'ai envie d'aborder la question un peu différemment au sens où
I look at this issue somewhat differently. I'm not an expert in conflict management. That's not my qualification. But in the activist movements, what are the structures that lead to conflicts? You need to understand everybody's positions. Conflict doesn't happen just like that. It might be that one day you're in a bad mood, but there might be different structures, power relations that lead to conflict. We tend to turn a blind eye to our own domination. That happens, and it can lead to conflict. But it's really a matter of educating oneself to one's own situation, vision. We talked about it in relation to Raoul Peck's film, which is called Orwell 2+2 is 5, which is a remarkable movie. And he talks about the way neoliberalism has created a noveling to make the world incomprehensible. And I think activists, artists have one task. They have to make the world comprehensible, and they have to dig up conflicts that have been buried into the ground by neoliberalism for everyone's good. So I would like these conflicts to resurface. It's much healthier to deal with them and manage them. But we have to take up these conflicts and realize that humanity progresses through conflicts. I totally agree with you. I'm stepping outside my role, but I totally agree with you.
Je voulais juste te dire aussi, on a toujours la sensation qu'on
Also,
c'est vrai que là,
we always feel like we're losing, and we can't say right now that we're triumphant, but we can't know what things would look like if we hadn't fought, because we haven't achieved our objective, to topple capitalism, the patriarchy, and the entire international system. We don't know what things would look like if they had fully won, and that narrative that we keep repeating, that they've won, it's something that is wearing us out, and it's important to be pragmatic. And you're talking about activist fatigue, activism fatigue. It's very important to be pragmatic and to manage your own fatigue within activism. Sarah, do you want to react to that? I'm waiting for questions from the room. We still have 5 minutes for the panel, so... Great. I'm being told that, yes, we do have 5 more minutes for the debate. It feels like we are currently witnessing backlash of all the struggles that we have fought these past years. So, as you said, Adèle, sometimes we can wonder if we've failed. But maybe this backlash is just a symptom of our success. In some places, it means that our struggles have shed light on some specific issues.
We were winning, that's why they're crushing us.
Not exactly, but in a way, est-ce que c'est pas normal qu'il y ait un backlash?
No, my question is, don't you think it's normal to face backlash? In your previous struggles, did you encounter that issue?
People aren't never going to go back. You think queer people are going to go back in the closet? Or, I mean, like, you know, it's just not going to happen. Like in the United States now, half the women of the United States lost the right to abortion, right? It's insane. But, you know, so many people are fighting against this. Like now we have what's called non-medical abortion pill, which is so much easier to get, and you can get it through the mail. And people are trying to figure out how to help people travel so that if you're from Texas and you need an abortion, people from New York are giving money to funds so they can get you on a plane so you can get to New York, so you can get you know, it's like people are smart. We're smart. And people have integrity, and they're trying to go like this right now. But the mentality that we've gained is not going to disappear. Like, because you think that Black people are going to say, okay, we don't have to talk about slavery anymore, the economic basis of the U.S. economy, because Donald Trump doesn't want to? No, they're not. So, you know, I mean, there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of cruelty right now. There's brutality. We literally have these idiots, ICE, on the streets of our city arresting people, and you can see it when you're walking around. I mean, it's unreal. But people aren't just saying, okay. They're not. We don't have the power now, but maybe you saw in Minneapolis, 30,000 nice white people, normal American citizens, went out there because they were like, no. So, I mean, I just don't think that people are going to shut up or give up. I really don't.
Ma question, c'est est-ce que
Could you ask a question again? Yeah.
Genre, est-ce que c'est notre faute s'ils sont devenus des fachos, quoi?
So your question is it our fault if they became fascists? We went too far, they were queer feminists before. No. No.
Je pense que, en fait, le fait est que, après, c'est ma manière de penser, je sais pas, mais moi, j'ai l'impression que
the way I see things, but what I think happened, I wouldn't talk about a backlash. I think it's a globalized fascist assault. And I think that violence and cruelty were always at the heart of their project. They were invisibilized and they were normalized, so to speak. And when we started struggling then and organizing, repression became necessary for them. But that's not when violence was invented. It just became obvious. Yeah, I see what you mean. This fascist backlash, it's becoming more radical, but it may be a symptom of the fact that our fights have been efficient and worked in the end. In Italy, the Meloni government is strengthening the law to allow for more repression. But as you were saying, we won't go back to before we made these progress. Well, nothing is written in stone. It's difficult right now, and we feel hopeless, but that's part of the struggle, It's a tool for control to make us think that we've lost. Of course, it's difficult when you see all these manifestations of cruelty Cruelty is almost a way of living today. It's part of the whole narrative to make us governable. And so you have great ideas and you have pragmatism. You have to be pragmatic. How much time do you have in your own life? How much time can you allocate to what? And then you can decide what you want to fight for. Maybe it's a hopeless cause, but maybe not. And you will start going into resistance with the three people that you've just met. Sarah talks about anti-heroism because Hollywood made that concept up, with the lone hero.
It's interesting because, earlier I was talking about how, banal culture undermines democracy, right? And the thing that moves us forward is counterculture, when people create their own aesthetics from the margins. And what's so interesting is watching what's happening on American campuses. I don't know about here, but students are being expelled and having their diplomas taken away because they support Palestine. So what they're doing is they're creating these people who are they're becoming alienated in relationship to these institutions of power and hierarchy. And that's a good thing, right? Because that produces the leaders of the future, and it helps them think for themselves. So we're the backlash, hopefully.
Mais j'ai envie de rebondir sur un truc très précis.
I want to bounce back on a very specific thing that you just brought up. Just to give you an example, it's not just happening in the US. Repression, I know that in Paris, in the Fine Arts School, I know that one student is going to be questioned by management because he flew a Palestinian flag. And the school decided that, no, you can't do that. You can't make that type of art. It's laughable, it's pathetic, but that's fascism at work. That's just an example of what's going on in art schools because it's absurd. And yet, it's a good indicator of the gravity of the situation. Yes, and the cops going to Violette & Co, a lesbian bookshop. It's the only openly lesbian bookshop in Paris. In the shop window, they had a coloring book, and the cops came down to the shop and they seized some books. So that's state repression in France for you. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Maybe we can now move to questions from the audience. There will be microphones circulating in the rooms, so feel free to ask questions. I know it can feel quite daunting to speak up and ask a question, but don't hesitate. Good evening. I have a question for Sarah Schulman. I'm going to ask my question in French, unfortunately. Could you briefly share with us your vision of the evolution of activism in your generation?
So this is why I love my new mayor, Mamdani, in New York, because this is the vision. People did not vote to go back to the dysfunctional, unjust world that existed before Trump. They did not panic to vote for the boring, banal, destructive center of the Democratic Party. They voted for a future vision of the world they wanted to live in. They voted for a candidate who said, I'm going to give you free childcare. New York City is not going to do business with Israel. All these types of things, and he's done it in 2 months. In 10 days, he started free childcare. He broke all economic relationships, investments from New York to Israel. He gave out thousands of free theater tickets, and he's building free public bathrooms. He's only been mayor for 3 months. This was the image of people are thinking of, what do we really want? Because one of the advantages of a moment like this is you can finally say, what kind of world do I really want to live in? What kind of society do I really want? Let's say that and work towards that. So c'est ça mon réponse.
Unfortunately, the question is put without a microphone.
Dans votre pays.
Is there a difference between activism in the 70s and today?
To make a historical stuff about the comparison between the 60s.
Je ne sais pas.
I don't know. I don't know. I was born in 1958.
Je ne sais pas. On pense à l'avenir.
I don't know, but we have to turn towards the future.
Il y a une question.
There's a question right here.
Oui, bonsoir.
Good evening. I'll also be speaking French. I have a question that's a little tricky. It has to do with the lived experience of minorities. If we take the gay issue, Israel says it defends homosexuals, whereas the barbarians living in neighboring countries would kill them. I think that's it in a nutshell. It's the philosophy in a nutshell of a lot of people living in Israel. So what do you do about this? That's my first question. Second question. It's difficult. I don't have the answer, but let's take the example of Senegal. Senegal is a country that was colonized for a long time until very recently by France. Senegal managed in recent times to liberate itself from this colonial system. They still have francs, but they have chased the French military, despite French military bases still being there, their agreements. And recently, the Senegalese parliament has decided to criminalize homosexuality by 5 to 10 years in prison. The question is simple. I guess the answer is complicated. But how can you show solidarity with anti-colonial struggles? It seems self-evident, while still speaking up against something else, which is a violation of what you've mentioned a while ago, which is solidarities between people.
Yeah, you're doing the 2 + 2 = 5 thing. Okay, you know, put on your. So let's start with Israel. We have a concept called pinkwashing. And pinkwashing is when people say, well, you know, there's gay life in Tel Aviv, so Israel is a modern progressive country. And they whitewash the crimes against Palestinians. We call it pinkwashing, because they use the hard-won gains of gay people to make invisible the war crimes that they're committing. But we're too smart for that, us queers here. So we don't play that game. And believe me, I come from a homophobic Jewish family. So I don't need them to tell me that, oh, those people over there are homophobes and we colonials are so great for queer people. That is not the way it plays out. Now, the rise of homophobia that you're talking about is heavily funded by right-wing Christian movements in the United States. They have been sending people all over the world to spread the gospel of homophobia. So the fact that it's effective is not shocking. But we have to know what our values are and what we believe in, right? And we believe in self-determination for each person. And you don't throw that out the window because somebody somewhere has an anti-gay position. That's not what defines your entire worldview. You know, in the United States right now, in Florida, They took every gay book out of the library. You cannot get a gay book in the library. Do I think that they should be bombed and killed in Florida because they took gay books out of the library? No, we have to go back down there and put the books back in. That's it.
Est-ce qu'il y a encore une question?
Are there other questions in the room?
Ok, là-bas, là-bas. Oui.
I think there's one over there.
Merci beaucoup pour le micro.
And thanks for handing the mic. Thank you very much.
Bonjour.
Good evening, and thank you very much for this very interesting debate. I have a question that has to do with fear. I get the feeling that all fascist movements, the media, are in the process of instilling fear in people. As Adèle Haenel said a while ago, what we're doing right now is we're fighting, and they have to defend themselves, and they attack us in return. And one of their strategies to attack us is to instill fear. And this fear is very dangerous for movements. A certain number of people, I don't know, I can take the example of the attacks. There was the death of a right-wing activist in France, Quentin, and people have been afraid to demonstrate. So I was wondering what you thought about building collective struggles and how we can fight against this fear that is being instilled.
Je pense que tout le monde... Enfin, déjà, il y a une réalité de la violence d'État.
Well, first of all, state violence is a reality, and fascist violence is a reality, and not all bodies are as submitted to state violence and fascist violence. And that's something that you need to bear in mind. You talk about fear, but it's not homogeneous. The consequences are not homogeneous. It depends on the various bodies and their political meaning, and that's something that you need to bear in mind.
Je sais pas, je me dis, bah, y a des... Après, ça peut se répondre, on peut répondre de plein de manières.
You can answer in many different ways, but there are different demonstration techniques. If I end up in a situation where, because of my color of skin, because of my social status, I'm less fragile, I could stand in front. And those who are more fragile, more weak, they could stand behind me. So I don't think fear is a homogeneous concept. And fear is logical in a sense. It's not something that you release spontaneously. I spoke about the School of Fine Arts. It seems to be a minor example, but if you look at pro-Palestinian demonstrations, the level of police violence is absolutely incredible. So this fear doesn't come out of the blue. And then I get the feeling that if I were to give an answer, it's through political action in and of itself that you find a way to manage this fear. It's not something that you can sweep under the carpet. It's there. Sometimes you can get rid of it. Sometimes it comes back. But it's through disobedience, by forcing yourself to disobey on a daily basis, that you educate yourself and become brave.
I mean, I'm more afraid of what's going to happen if we do nothing.
C'est la version rationnelle.
That's the rational version of what I was saying. If I may add something to what's just been said, is that the issue of fear is something that I see very present in the far right. When you vote for the far right, there's an emotional component, and that's fear. And I always admire my queer, disabled siblings and comrades how they deal with fear. They're fearless. They've turned their fear in something that's reminiscent of social fabric. And in the face of fear, I get the feeling that we try to build communities, and that's exactly the reason why the French state talks about communitarism. Reading Sarah's books that talk about the struggle for people living with HIV/AIDS, I get the feeling that fear is not something that they feel themselves. She also says that there are ways of finding collective courage. If you're sick, if you're weak, if you're disabled, and yet you want to participate, you can see how bodies that are less exposed to state violence can protect you. And that changes from one situation to the next, because vulnerability is not something that's there once and for all. It's changing, it's evolving, it's in a flux. And what you say about fear is very interesting. I feel that fear is not necessarily in our camp. All my comrades, all my brothers and sisters, my siblings are very courageous despite this existential fear.
Effectivement, la peur peut-être n'est pas l'opposé, mais
I'll bounce back on that.
Le fait de, comme a dit Sarah, en fait,
As Sarah said,
ce qui fait peur, c'est de rien
if
faire.
we look at things rationally, what's scary is if we're not to do anything, because on the very short term, if we don't do anything, we're clearly in deep shit. And about fear, what's important is to, maybe channel our anger, our energy on to efficient objectives. And I think it's also important to try as much as we can not to be in denial, stop that colonial denial, white denial, and always learn, always educate ourselves on the violence of the system. Because when you look at things for what they are, and when you look at the injustice that all bodies have to suffer, I find it very difficult not to find the courage to act. Thank you. Maybe we have time for one last question?
Hi. Is it okay if I ask my question in English? Okay. So this is piggybacking off of what Adèle said, but more a question for you, Sarah, because I think you are the most knowledgeable in this. But you mentioned the protests in Michigan and
Minnesota.
In Minnesota, sorry. And I was wondering what your analysis kind of was in maybe the shift in the white liberal mindset in terms of putting yourself, your body in danger, because I used to live in DC during the BLM protests, and I remember the idea very much was white bodies in front to protect, people of color in the back. And now, given the fact that 2 white people were killed, I was wondering what your experience and your analysis of kind of the repercussions of that in, someone who's maybe I don't know, has a lot of thoughts about what's going on, but maybe isn't ready or
I don't know, there was a woman in a red coat who was filming the police killing one of these white men, Alex Preddy. And she risked her life to film this thing. And they found her and they interviewed her, and she was like some blonde white woman in her 30s from Minnesota with a Scandinavian last name, like a lot of people in Minnesota. And the reporter asked her, "How long have you been an activist?" And she said, 3 weeks. So that's what I think is happening.
Alors, il y avait une toute dernière question ici.
I think there was one last question.
Ah, il y a 2 personnes.
There are 2 questions.
Bonsoir, merci beaucoup.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the floor. I had a question. We've talked a lot about the individual perspective on things. I work with an association where we defend disenfranchised people, and we're looking at maybe building alliance with other, maybe stronger movements, and we are afraid to put ourselves in danger and to jeopardize some of the victories that we've made. So how do you do the math? You know, we're going towards political struggle, and we're trying to become more radical. But when do we draw the line? When we're putting in danger the people we're defending. I'm really sorry. I'm not sure I understood your question, says Adèle. How do you do the math? You know, you're taking care of some people, you're representing a group of persons, and at some point, there's a point where you have to make choices. If you want to radicalize yourself further, how do you balance the risk? You're talking about the ethics of risk-taking. So you're taking care of people who are more fragile than you are, and you're talking about you yourself taking risks, and that risk will also weigh on the shoulders of these other people that you're defending. And you want me to answer that? Well, I don't know what to say. If you're responsible for other people, then of course, I'm not sure I can answer that question. I'm sure Sarah will say something better.
Sorry, she doesn't really get the question. But yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, pour moi non plus, j'ai pas très bien compris la question. Non, juste, ça, ce serait un move un peu héroïque, dans le sens où tu dis ma pureté à moi, militante.
Well, that would be a heroic move. You would say that your activist purity would be more important than the cause that you're defending. I'm reinterpreting your words, but that's what Sarah's been saying from the start. What matters is how efficient your fight is, not how radical you are. I hope I didn't misunderstand you. There was another question. A very quick question. It's a personal question, and maybe it goes out to Adèle. I'm an actor. I'm an anonymous actor. And as you said earlier, you sacrificed your career to become an activist. And I wanted to know if you thought
de le faire de manière sainement ou il marche plus.
Non, le micro ne marche plus.
Là, on s'est fait couper la parole.
Bonjour, t'as compris ma question ou pas?
J'ai compris ta question.
all the microphones were off.
J'ai fait un choix politique.
I'm going to answer your question. I answered it. I didn't sacrifice my career. I made a political choice that makes me proud. I paid a price. I didn't sacrifice anything. I paid a price that I was ready to pay. And I'm still making art, and I'm making art that makes a lot more sense from my perspective than the things I did before. So you ask me if there's hope. Well, there's a lot of hope, and I wish you the best. Thank you.
Je crois qu'il faut qu'on s'arrête ici. Je sais pas.
I think we'll have to stop at that. I don't know if you want to say a few last words. Well, I just wanted to thank Sarah for the discussion. It was very interesting to listen to you. Thank you, and thank you for your courage. Thank you. And thank you for the questions.
Bonne soirée.
Have a lovely evening.